We are back on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio, News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, and now in Albuquerque, New Mexico at 1000 KKIM. Clay, if we had any more stations, I'm going to have to use 2 or 3 breaths to go through all of our stations. It's getting a little tough now.
Or maybe we just won't talk about where we are and just go on the air.
We could do that, too. That's true. We could do that. Our in-studio guest is Kern County District Attorney Lisa Green, who's been gracious enough to be with us for the hour. So, Lisa, talking a little bit, I know we can't get into the political aspects of all this, but one of the things that Governor Brown has done in the last couple of weeks is he's looking at the out-of-state inmates we have. There's about 9,000 of them, and he wants to bring them back. What is he thinking, and how is that going to affect the individual counties? Because we're at the cap now. We can't actually bring these back into the state system because we don't have the room or the money.
Well, it costs California to house inmates in other states. And so because our prisons were overcrowded, I mean, one of the reasons for realignment, it's a number of reasons, but one of the Governor Brown's solutions to the overcrowding in the prison was to release a lot of these inmates, parole these inmates to the counties. The inmates that are being housed out of state would come back to the state prison system because I believe they've been successful in releasing around 35,000 inmates since realignment took effect. So now I think the prisons are at a point where they could accommodate these inmates, and it would save the state of California quite a bit of money. Now, whether they're all eligible for parole or how many would ultimately be released to the counties, I don't know.
Okay, now, looking at the overcrowding, one of the other propositions that passed in November was Prop 34, so which kept the death penalty the way it is.
Yes.
So is there any provisions to enforce the death penalty? Because we've got people that are sitting there on death row for 20 years in California.
Oh, longer than that, actually. But I think that as a result of Proposition 34, that the people who were active in trying to defeat it, realize that it's actually the system is broken, but the fix isn't that difficult. And in California, if the governor were to basically, take affirmative steps to have California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation implement a one-drug protocol, which is used in other states in the United States, I believe it was either Washington or Ohio that implemented the one-drug protocol, and it only took 6 months. So there is a fix, there is a solution. Governor Brown is anti-death penalty, as is the Attorney General. So there's not a rush to do this, but there are people who feel that are moving, myself included, to try to have this corrected so that executions can resume in the state of California. I mean, the people, once again, have indicated that they want the death penalty and they want to see it implemented.
Lisa, I've been led to believe that it's more expensive to execute someone than it is to keep them in jail for life. Can you explain why? Well,
I don't agree with that. And part of the problem is because it's a multi-layered problem, but the appeals are endless in California, and then the federal appeals. There have been a couple of recent court opinions to streamline the appeals process, so that executions, that we don't have interminable appeals. One death row inmate, I remember reading he changed his name, and he's had about 12 different appeals, and it's just nonstop, and it has to stop. And there is, like I said, there's been a couple of court opinions that will help streamline that, but other states don't have. I'm not for death row. I am for death row inmates having their appeals and having the issues resolved. But some of these cases, there is no question about the guilt of the individual. He's either confessed to it or there's some issue, and yet these interminable appeals go on and on and on, and that is what drives up the cost. Attorneys, the ACLU, represents these inmates, and it does have to stop, and hopefully we will see a change in California and move to the one-drug protocol.
Now, Lisa, when you say the one-drug protocol, you mean one drug to use in the injection process.
Yes. In 2006, there was a court ruling that it was cruel and unusual. Lethal injection was cruel and unusual punishment because of the drugs they used, and that was the 3-drug protocol, and it's been litigated for a number of years. Now, one of the drugs in the 3-drug protocol isn't even available in the United States, so I don't mean to sound glib, but it is a simple fix to move to the 1-drug protocol that other states have adopted and have resumed executions.
But we don't want to inflict any pain on any prisoner like they did to the people that they murdered.
Sometimes in these cases, the victims and the victims' family members just get lost. What they've gone through and what they've suffered, and it's very, I don't want to ever feel that we lose sight of victims and their rights, and they're not forgotten. The families are not forgotten.
Even though sometimes it appears that way. We're having a conversation with Kern County District Attorney Lisa Green.
But assuming we do go ahead and start to do executions, would you do DNA testing before someone is executed to make sure that they were the actual criminal?
There's procedures in place for requests for that type of testing. So I wouldn't say automatically that we would. If there was some reason to think that that the person hadn't committed the crime or that they were actually innocent, there's procedures in place for that request to be made, and it just depends on a lot of factors of whether there was even a lot of cases there isn't any material that would allow for any type of DNA testing. But if there was a question about that, absolutely we would do that.
Firing squad seems like a good idea, doesn't it? I mean,
I have a lot of good ideas.
Yeah, let the family members be a part of that firing squad if they want to be.
Lisa, what is the toughest decision that you've had to make since you've been in office, or the toughest case that you personally have prosecuted?
Oh, I would say the toughest case I personally prosecuted, I really couldn't even name one because I spent most of my career handling sexual assaults and homicide cases, which are all extremely difficult for different reasons. I mean, some are difficult because the impact on the victim, especially if it's a child, as in a child molest, but others are difficult because of the loss in a homicide to family members. So I don't think I could even identify one. They're also tragic. But the most difficult decision as the district attorney, I've had... there's been a lot of difficult decisions, but I really try to be guided by doing the right thing for the right reason. And I always feel no matter how difficult the decision, if I can articulate the reasons behind it, then I've done my job. You may not agree with those reasons, and oftentimes people don't, but that's how I approach some cases. Most recently, there was a woman whose child drowned. She was trying to cross a canal, and her boy fell in the canal and drowned. That was a difficult decision because the sheriff's department was requesting criminal charges, and we did not file criminal charges after really sitting down and analyzing the law and looking at the facts of that case. So there's a lot of things like that go on.
Did you prosecute the brothers case?
I did.
That was an interesting case because you had to get information from back where he came from and how he got here, and I guess I would think that would have been a tough case to prosecute at the time.
Well, it was a difficult case, and it involved 3 states and all those kinds of things. It's always difficult when children are victims, but you just you go in there and do put all the facts before the jury and hope they see it the way you see it, and in that case, they did, and he's on death row where he belongs.
Good. Lisa, we've got about a minute and a half left, and I have kind of an odd kind of question. We had somebody in before the election, and they were talking about voter fraud.
Yes.
He gave an example of a household they found here in Kern County where there was a John Smith. He was registered to vote 5 times under J.A. Smith, A.J. Smith, all kinds of... So... And we've talked to DAs back east, and they're hesitant to prosecute those cases because they really can't go after the people causing it. It's just the person in the middle that gets prosecuted. Is there any way to stop voter fraud? Because really, that's our most basic right as American citizens.
Well, it's actually more common than you think, the situation that you've described. And in my office, the way we handle it is that if there is an allegation or a suggestion of voter fraud, oftentimes it comes to the attention of the elections division here in Kern County. They refer it to my Bureau of Investigations, and we do have one investigator. That's not his only assignment, but he is in charge of looking into those allegations and determining if it is something that actually we could go forward and prosecute, whether it's, the person behind the fraud or actually the individual who's committing the fraud. It depends. For the most part, it's just a misdemeanor, but that's still a crime, and so we do look into that, and we take those seriously.
Sure, because, not to pick on one side over the other, but, both sides are guilty of this. Lisa, thank you so much for spending the time with us, and we'd love to have
My
you come
pleasure.
back sometime between now and the election in 2014.
Thank you.
And make an announcement.
Yes, you can make the announcement on our show.
Okay, fair enough.
We'll be back in 167 hours on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio, News Talk, 1180.